Chapter 1. Hollow Hills Haunting Hollow. Hill was encircled by old trees that howled in the wind, creating spooky shadows that moved across the moonlight ground. Nestled in the middle of the forest, the little hamlet of Ravenswood has always been a serene and content place to be. But on this specific night, there was an unexplainable cold in the air and a general feeling of dread across the community. A young woman in her mid-20s named Emma Miller had recently relocated to Ravenswood in an attempt to escape the mayhem of the city. Tucked away from prying eyes on the outskirts of town was an ancient, dilapidated home that she had discovered. She had believed it to be a solitary spot. Strange things started to happen to Emma as she got used to her new house. Initially, it was only small, strange noises like a floorboard creaking in the middle of the night or a wind-blown murmur of voices. She dismissed them as hallucinations, but as the days stretched into weeks, the incidents grew more disturbing. One evening, Emma heard footsteps in the hallway while she was making supper in the poorly lighted kitchen. She turned in shock to see nothing but blackness. With her heart racing, she walked down the little hallway, the aged wooden floor giving an unsettling echo to her footfall. The eerie quiet was only disturbed by an owl hooting in the distance. Emma saw a flickering illumination emanating from a room she hadn't visited since moving in, as she neared the end of the corridor. The door was slightly open, beckoning her to enter. Her curiosity overcame her fear as it clawed at her chest. It was not like the other rooms in the cabin. It was decorated with wallpaper that bore weird symbols and eerie scenes, all fading and devoured by moths. A ring of candles blazed in the middle of the space, creating unsettling shadows on the walls. And there was an ancient, worn diary in the center of the circle. Emma carefully walked over to the journal and took it up. The leather cover was cold to the touch and had a hint of moisture. The pages rustled when she opened it, whispering like ghosts. Inside was handwritten in an archaic and spidery language she was unable to understand. The room was suddenly filled with a rush of wind that blew out the candles. Emma felt something terrible and old enveloping her as the darkness engulfed her. Fumbling for the diary, she staggered back, wanting to get out of the room. With an unbearable thud, the door behind her slammed shut as soon as she arrived in the corridor. The evil force surrounded Emma, trapping her in the shadows and sending shivers down her spine with its unintelligible whispers. With the ancient notebook in her shaking hands and the evil force closing in, Emma was left stranded in the haunting room at the end of Chapter 1. She was about to learn that there were more sinister secrets in Hollow Hill than she could have ever imagined. Chapter 2. Spirits of the Dead. Emma stood in the dark corridor. The door to the haunting room closed behind her, her heart racing. Her ears were filled with the eerie whispering of the malicious presence that appeared to be pressing in from every direction. Tightly gripping the old notebook, she attempted to settle her quivering hands. Emma became desperate and reached for her phone, navigating the stifling darkness with its weak flashlight. The mansion sounded as if it were alive, reacting to some strange presence with every step she took. The whispers became louder and more forceful as she made her way through the winding passageways with caution. They were words now, spoken in a language she could not comprehend, not just faint whispers. It seemed as though the house's walls themselves were attempting to warn or converse with her. Emma felt a wave of relief as she finally arrived at the front door and seen a glimmer of moonlight peeking through a neighboring window. The doorknob would not turn as she went towards it. She was filled with panic again. There was nowhere for her to go but within her own cabin. Emma could find no alternative course of action except to take on the evil power head-on. The murmurs became stronger as she turned around and headed back to the haunted chamber. The candles sprang back to life on their own as she pulled the door wide, creating a ghostly flickering light that gave the unsettling wallpaper life. She was drawn toward a frayed recliner in the room's corner by the antique diary that seemed to be pulsing with electricity in her hands. The murmurs had become a cacophony of voices from another realm when she sat down. The diary seemed to call out to her to open it again, and when she did, pages full of mysterious symbols were revealed. Emma's eyes lingered on one symbol in particular, a circular with complex patterns inside. The sign appeared to come to life as she watched, its lines intertwining and altering. It was a doorway to something she could not understand. Emma tapped the sign with shaky fingers and the room instantly changed. She was standing in a barren, strange environment instead of the cottage. In the distance, hideous, dark silhouettes could be seen moving in the sickly green sky. Her ears were filled with a loud boom instead of the whisper of the malignant spirit. It was asking for something she couldn't understand. She was overcome with fear and uncertainty upon realizing that she had ventured into a dangerous and darker world than she had ever imagined. After Emma entered a terrifying otherworldly place, the power of the ancient notebook was revealed, and a malignant force demanded something from her. Chapter 2 came to a conclusion. She realized that her voyage into the unknown had only just begun as she struggled with her circumstances. Chapter 3: Dead People's Spirits. With her heart pounding, Emma stood in the dimly lit hallway as the door to the eerie chamber closed behind her. The evil presence seemed to be pushing in from all sides, and her ears were full of its unsettling whispers. Grasping the ancient notepad tightly, she tried to steady her trembling hands. Emma groped for her phone in desperation, using its meager lighting to make her way through the oppressive blackness. With each step she made, the house sounded as though it were responding to some alien presence. She moved cautiously down the narrow hallways, the voices growing louder and more insistent. Now they were more than whispers. They were words uttered in a language she could not understand. The walls of the home seemed to be trying to warn her, or at least communicate with her. When Emma at last reached the front door and seen a sliver of moonlight shining through a nearby window, she felt a feeling of comfort. She moved to the door, but the doorknob would not turn. She was overcome with terror once more. She had no choice but to stay in her own cabin. There was nothing else Emma could have done but confront the awful power. As she turned to return to the haunting chamber, the murmuring grew louder. She swung the door wide and the candles sprang back to life on their own, casting a flickering, ghostly light that brought life to the eerie wallpaper. The old diary she was holding appeared to be throbbing with electricity, drawing her toward a ragged chair in the corner of the room. When she sat down, the whispers had grown into a chorus of voices from another world. When she opened the journal again, it appeared to be calling to her, and pages filled of enigmatic symbols were revealed. Emma focused her attention on a single sign, a circle with intricate patterns inside. As she gazed, the sign's lines seemed to morph and change, almost coming to life. It was a portal to an unknown realm beyond her comprehension. Emma's fingers trembled as she tapped the sign, and the environment altered in an instant. Rather of being in the cottage, she was now in a strange and desolate place. Far above, grotesque black figures moved through the sickly green sky. Rather than hearing the evil spirit's whisper, she heard a deafening boom. She was unable to comprehend what it was requesting. When she realized she had entered a world more darker and more frightening than she had ever imagined, she was struck with terror and anxiety. Chapter 2 ended with Emma going into a terrible otherworldly location, learning the power of the old notebook, and being asked to do something by a malevolent force. As she battled her situation, she recognized that her journey into the unknown had only just begun. Chapter 4: The Struggle for Equality. Emma faced the terrifying being that had surfaced from the abyss as she stood at its brink. The creature had a shape-shifting appearance that was a hideous combination of gnarled appendages, open mouths, and evil eyes that stared deep into Emma's soul. There was an air of sheer terror about it, but Emma would not give in to fear. She gathered the confidence to face the evil entity while holding the old journal. She felt a rush of power flow through her as the journal's pages glowed with an unearthly intensity. She opened the diary to a blank page with shaking hands and wrote lines of resistance that resounded with old power. Her pen took on a life of its own as the words came forth, encircling her in a barrier of protection. The terrifying monster drew back, its hideous shape writhing in pain as the ethereal energy from the notebook drove it away. Emma noticed a hint of panic flashing in the entity's eyes for the first time. However, the conflict was far from ended. The evil force that had brought her to this world roared at her attempts to escape. It launched a flurry of telepathic attacks in an attempt to weaken her resolve. She was threatened with being overcome by flashbacks to her worst regrets and anxieties. Emma tightened her jaws and held onto the diary firmly. She resisted the darkness's assault by drawing on her inner power. She summoned the old magic of the diary with all the will she had to fortify her defenses. In a last desperate move, the terrifying being released a torrent of dark strands that stretched out to trap her. Emma tried to keep her composure, but her heart was racing. She threw all of her energy into the diary, putting all of her determination into the writing she had done. The shielding barrier erupted into a dazzling flash of light, permanently driving away the intruder. When the evil energy was exiled back into the abyss from which it originated, it let forth an audible cry of annoyance. The gap in the unearthly dimension grew as the monster withdrew, exposing a route back to Emma's own reality. She went through the breach, leaving the nightmare terrain behind, with one last burst of resolve. Emma found herself back in her cottage holding the old journal as she came through on the other side. The heavy blackness had passed, and Hollow Hill was once again enveloped in tranquility. She understood that her struggle was at last ended, as she had defeated the evil thing that had been haunting her. However, she became aware of the journal's immense power as she glanced down at it. She knew she had to keep it carefully because it contained power and mysteries she could never completely understand. She was altered by the atrocities she had experienced, but she was determined to make good use of the journal's power. Emma triumphantly returned to her home planet at the end of Chapter 4, having defeated the evil power and become stronger as a result of the experience. She realized that her adventure was far from done as she thought about the old diary and its secrets. She will keep exploring the journal's depths and protecting her newly acquired information.